All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you and welcome to the Remarkable Coach podcast. I'm here with Christine Kloser. Christine is a USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestselling author. She's coached tens of thousands of aspiring authors to write their transformational books through her author-centric courses, events, programs, and services. Christine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. I'm excited to have you. Let's just start out, kind of tell us, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself. Start there.
Absolutely. Well, as Michael said, I've been working with authors for a number of years. I started in writing and publishing in 2004 after I myself had felt very much like I had a story inside of me that needed to be told, but I had never been told that my voice really mattered. I had never been, encouraged to truly express what was inside of me. So by 2004, when I was running a networking group in Los Angeles, I was the founder of that group. I heard so many people in that group, these women being like, I know I have a story to share. I want to be a published author. Chicken Soup for the Soul was like all the craze at that time. I think they were at the peak of their sale, although they still keep selling millions of copies. And I was like, you know what? Why don't I figure out how to publish a book as the leader of this group, and I'll invite other women to write chapters. We can all write a chapter. None of us knew how to write our own book, but we could all write a chapter. Mm-hmm. So that was like my entree into the publishing world. And I actually was learning how to publish a book because my husband had this inspired idea to write a book, and we were newlyweds in 2001. And in 2002, he had this idea to write a book where he would interview all these Major League Baseball players about, the mental side of the game, the mindset side of the game. And I was like, go ahead, honey, you do that and I'll figure out how to publish it. Thinking he never would because he didn't know a single Major League Baseball player, or he didn't know anyone who knew a Major League Baseball player. So he actually went out and interviewed over 300 Major League ball players from all 30 Major League teams. So I was figuring out how to publish his book for him.
You were on the hook?
I was on the hook, totally on the hook. But I figured as long as I'm learning for him and doing this for him, why don't I finally do it for me and, 39 other women who, raised their hand to be in my very first book called Inspiration to Realization. And that book, it was published in 2004. And by the summer of 2005, it was written up in the print edition of Entrepreneur Magazine as one of the top books for women entrepreneurs to read that summer. And that was 2004, 2005, and here we are now. So it just kept going from there.
That's awesome. I love a good origin story.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about why this? Why coaching? I mean, it's clearly from the origin story, there was a little bit of serendipity there. But you've stuck with it. This is something that you love, you believe in, you're passionate about. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's interesting because it wasn't truly intentional. Like I said yes to my husband because I loved him. We were newlyweds. He's crazy about baseball. I really never thought he'd ever, get any interviews, nonetheless 300. So I sort of fell into it. Mm-hmm. And I fell into it for a number of years. And to be honest with you, I actually always kept books and publishing and everything book and publishing related at an arm's length. I'm like, oh, that's my side hustle. That's like that side gig. Mm-hmm. And through a number of different experiences, I came to realize like, this is not supposed to be my side gig. Like this is my main gig. And two real key things happened for me that made me realize back in 2011, this is my main gig, right? One of those things is that I had the experience of writing the wrong book. It's a great book. We've sold thousands of copies. Neil Donald Walsh, number one all over New York Times bestseller for years with the Conversations of God series, wrote the foreword for me. It's a phenomenal book, but for who I was and where I was supposed to be serving in the world, mm-hmm. I wrote a book that wasn't aligned with that. And when I went to my coach, because I paid a boatload of money to be coached at a really high level. And I'm like, something doesn't feel right. The coach, like I'm in tears, like something doesn't feel right. I got coached to do it, like go for it anyway. That's just fear talk. And that's just, you get scared because everything's happening. And like, I kind of know the difference, but I wasn't then who I am now. Sure. And back then I couldn't stand up to my coach and be like, no, I need your help to unwind this thing because it's not right. So I know the pain. of writing the wrong book, building a business around that book very quickly. And it was like a house of cards. And
Yeah.
within 6 months of building it, I pulled the plug and
Interesting.
lost everything. I knew I'd probably lose the business. I was sole income earner for my family. We went through bankruptcy. We lost our home. Like when I say pulled the plug, I mean pulled the plug.
Uh-huh.
And all my savings had gone into paying that coach and building that business, over a decade ago. So I know the pain and I don't want anyone to experience that. So that is part of what landed me to really realize this is the main gig, not the side hustle. And the other piece was, and it took me years, like I couldn't believe it, how long it took me to figure this piece of the puzzle out.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up in one of those households where it was kind of just better to be seen and not heard. My father was loud, Italian, Marine, somewhat hot tempered. Like he didn't need to hit me. He just needed to yell and it felt like being hit. So when it came to voices being heard in my family, and granted, like my dad, my mom, both like are incredible beings. I love them deeply. They loved me the best they could, the way they knew how from where they came from.
Mm-hmm.
But for me as a young child, I never felt like my voice really mattered. And it was years into helping authors where I was like, oh my God, like this is about helping people's voices be heard. Like when I graduated college, I hopped in a car and drove 3,000 miles away to a place I didn't know, where I didn't know any people, where I didn't have a job, where I didn't have a place to live, just to I didn't know consciously that I needed to break out and be free and live my life and be heard.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew that I couldn't stay in New England and I had to get out and there was something more for me. And it was about really finding my voice, my path. So, combine these things together. It's like, I'm in my sweet spot working with transformational authors. So I know it's a long story, but that's kind of how I got here.
So if you had an opportunity to go back and do it differently, would you?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I really.
Usually the answer is no.
I wouldn't. Was it painful? Yes. Would I wish it on anyone? Heck no. But who I became, what I learned, the depth in which I got to embody what I know and who I am and what I've learned, and to be able to teach and lead from that place over the last decade. I got here because of the fire that I went through.
Sure.
I wouldn't change it for the world.
Sure. So, okay, cool. So someone wants to write a book.
Yes.
Where do they start?
You actually don't start writing the book. This is a huge mistake that authors make. It's like, oh, I want to write a book. And they just start writing a book. And what happens when you do that is it's like, imagine a river that doesn't have any river banks. It's just water flowing everywhere with no form, no direction, no where the river starts and no where the river flows in. Like none of it. It's like a big, wet, dangerous, really difficult to clean up kind of mess. The same is true with your words. If you want to write a book and you start just like spewing out words everywhere without building a foundation first, you're in trouble. It's just going to be a long, difficult, more challenging process than it needs to be. So don't start writing first, build foundation first. So you know what this book is about, who it's for, where it's going, the promise you're delivering, the problem that you want to solve for your readers. Because I'm talking nonfiction here. That's where I work specifically in nonfiction. If you don't know that stuff first, like you can't write, at least you can't write a good book.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it sounds like, you're almost approaching the book as though it was a product. It is, right?
It is. And, there might be other products that you create that people will pay hundreds or thousands of dollars for, but your $12 to $20 book is going to bring you as a coach more authority. You can't say the word authority without the word author being in it. Mm-hmm. And I remember one of my clients early on was Allie Brown. I published an anthology for her and her community. And she had she had $1 million business at the time. Now it's multi-millions, I'm sure, but she had $1 million business. She was doing really well. She had, her program that she was selling. She had the binder. She had the CDs. This was back a while ago. And she said when that book came out, it's called Power and Soul, that when that book came out and her family saw that she was a published author, they're like, oh my gosh, like our daughter's a published author. And it was a whole, like her $3,000, course couldn't get them to see her as that kind of authority like a book
Sure.
does. So a book is still the gold standard and very much like a product, and needs to be thought of as such. I mean, it's a real deal. It's at least the way I do it. There's so many people out there telling you just, like answer these few questions, fill out this template, crank it through some factory and spit out a book.
Yeah.
That's not like, don't make any mistake that that's what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
I'm talking about your masterpiece. I'm talking about your message. I'm talking about, like, I just had a client, I was talking with her on a publishing mastermind not too long ago. We just published her book for her, and her standard is like really high. And when she got her book in her hands, like she wept at how beautiful and how perfect and how proud. And her mentor, Jack Canfield, saw the book and he was like, oh my gosh, this is gorgeous. What an amazing book. He endorsed it for her, like the whole 9 yards. Like if she just filled out some template and cranked something through a factory and spit out a book with like some random cover and an unedited manuscript and interior design that really wasn't designed in the first place, it's like, why bother writing a book? So yeah, product, masterpiece, legacy, whatever you want to call it, it's a big deal, and it can be a game changer though for anyone who's willing to do it and do it right.
Sure. So I want to I'm going to circle back a little bit to what you mentioned, these kind of author factories, these book factories. There's a lot of programs out there now, especially. There's a lot of people getting into coaching, getting into entrepreneurial stuff, wanting to become speakers, and for all that stuff, having written a book, as you mentioned, lends you all this authority. So to help serve that market, I think there's a lot of these kind of book factories that have popped up, like take this course, fill out this template, and boom, you've got a book. Do you think that ecosystem has led to the decline in perceived authority when someone says they've written a book, the ease of self-publishing on Amazon and that sort of thing?
I think to some degree, unfortunately, because the beauty of publishing in these days is that there is no barrier to entry. And the nemesis, the challenge of the industry is that there is no barrier to entry.
And there's no curation.
There's no curation. There's no quality control. I mean, the things that I have seen happen, like, burned me. Like, I actually stepped away from the publishing side of things for a while because doing it right it takes a lot of, well, I would say manpower. We do have men in our team, but majority of my 30 member team is women. It takes a tremendous, what's that? It takes women power. It takes lady power, right? It takes that thing that these women got. But anyway, it takes a lot to do it well. And it takes time to do it well. And I actually stepped away from publishing for a number of years. I'm like, this is just too much. There wasn't enough money in it. First of all, we weren't charging enough because we were just doing it to like help our clients as a little add-on to my Get Your Book Done course where they wrote their books. And I heard stories like, yeah, I hired this publisher that came very highly recommended. I had a great sales conversation with them. But when it came to the publishing of my book, I've heard things like my book was published in the wrong language. I've heard things like my book was published and they didn't even tell me. I found out from a friend that my book was published. I've seen manuscripts come to me from clients who contracted with someone else before they found us. And they were like, still like, well, I paid them, so I'm going to have them do this book, but I want to do my real book with you. The manuscripts that they were ready to put into production and publish hadn't been edited, like glaring errors. I'm talking like someone who was writing where English was their second language.
Yeah.
The book read like a second grader wrote it, and they were ready to print this. Yeah. So it is horrifying what's going on out there. And it has sadly had a little bit of impact. Like, oh yeah, well, you did a book. Everyone's doing a book. I mean, truth is not everyone's doing a book. Still only a teeny tiny fraction of people who say they want to write a book actually do it.
Sure.
But so many of the books out there are
Mediocre.
I had to say it. Yeah, mediocre. That's a kinder word than I was going to say. I was going to say junk.
Shit.
There's so many
They're
books out
shit.
there. Right. Well, I wasn't going to go there, but I was going to say so many books out there are junk, and it does. That's why when like this, I don't know if you can see, I have a stack behind me on my bookshelf. You're seeing the video. I'm like, these are 7 books that we just published, and every one of them I look at, you would think that it came out of Random House, not just the cover, the interior, the integrity and the level of quality that we demand of our authors in the editing process. Like, we are not going to produce crap. We're not. But so many people are like, just give me your money and I'll publish your book. And they literally, it's like, put the document in, run it through a factory, crank it out, call it a book. I've got your money. And you've got a book that's far less than what it could have been. And it's sad, which is why we're so adamant about the level of quality that we bring and the level of care really that we bring, because there is too much junk out there, and books are sacred. I mean, books are sacred. It's like one of the earliest forms. I mean, there was, writing in the cave walls. Like, they were using these symbols to communicate in the form of writing. Granted, it was shapes and forms and not letters at that time, but like, it's a sacred thing, a book. And they've become too commoditized and just factory based. And I'm on a mission to change that, because I still believe books are sacred and that authors are amazing, and every one of them should have the best possible book that they could write.
That's great. Okay, a couple things. Number one, I want to applaud how romantic you are about books. I love that. This is a very, very small collection of my books that I have behind me. We have bookshelves throughout the house. I 100% am super romantic about physical books.
Yeah, there's nothing like it.
I have a Kindle and I use it. It's not the same. And if I love a book, I will buy the physical copy. And out of years ago, I did translation, Japanese into English translation for a publishing house in Fukuoka, Japan, and learned a little bit about how the whole thing's done. It worked a little bit in InDesign, learned how to move stuff around, and I think the points, some of the points that you mentioned, about taking a document, a PDF document or whatever, just kind of cranking it through and just churning out, here's a book. The margins look awful. The font is
looks like a term paper inside.
Seriously,
double-spaced term. I mean, really? Come on.
I've got there's at least half dozen of those up there of marketing books that I've bought on Amazon that have been cranked out, and they're difficult to read. The line spacing is too thin, so the words are very close together, or the margins are off. There's any number of problems. So that is the fact that you mentioned that, and just like thinking about the quality of that. I think one of the ways that in which I romanticize books, I'm not trying to hijack the conversation. I apologize. I get excited about this.
No, go for it. I want to hear.
I'm passionate about it too. One of the things that I treasure about books is just opening up a book, and if it's beautiful to look at and it feels good in your hand. There's certain sizes of books, thicknesses of paper, fonts. I like Baskerville.
Okay. Note to self, Baskerville.
That just like feel good in your hand. But so selfishly, I want to ask a question too. Do you have an example of a book that was accidentally published in the wrong language? And how does that happen?
I do not know. And it was a publishing house, one of the ones who has lots of class action lawsuits and individual lawsuits against them. You'd certainly know them if I said the name, so I'm not going to say it. And I'm not even going to say the title, because then you could go and figure it out. But I will tell you that the author's name begins with S, but I'm not going to say any more than that. Yeah, I mean, she was wrote in English, submitted a manuscript in English. And when she saw her proof copy of the book, it took her a while to figure out, but it was in Dutch. I mean, I don't know how this stuff happens. I don't know how a company can receive, and publishing a decent book with a good house is going to cost you $10,000 to $20,000, right?
Sure.
Like, to do it well and to have a high level, supposedly have a high level of customer support and guidance through the process. I mean, like I've had people who have sent in their manuscript and then like the company has my money and my manuscript, but they can't talk to anyone who knows anything about what's actually happening with their book and where it is in the process. They're like the author's forgotten about. So I guess if that's how you run things, you can pump something out in Dutch or publish a book without telling the author that their book is published. Yeah, it's kind of scary.
It strikes me as amazing. It's not easy to translate a book.
No.
It is a very time consuming process. You have to pay the translator. And for an author to submit a manuscript in English and receive a galley or published, I guess, I don't know if it was a galley, if it was just straight up published in a separate language that was translated without their knowledge, that blows me away. That's crazy.
All I can think is that they must have somehow confused that author, maybe with another author whose book was supposed to be in Dutch. But when you don't have people managing quality control along the way,
Right.
It's like, oh, it's like,
oopsums.
Oops, wrong book. I mean, I don't get it. I could talk about that stuff for a while because it really gets under my skin that, it feels like highway robbery. I knew someone who paid $30,000 to someone to help her write her book. She never even saw a book cover. Forget about that the book didn't get published. 30 grand later, she never saw a book cover. I mean,
that's awful.
It is awful. So that's why I got back into publishing because like my tender heart, like can't handle any more of these stories. Like, okay, I'll start publishing again. And like we've got 25 books in the hopper right now, just in the publishing company, separate from what we do with helping people write the books. And we really don't market my publishing company. It's like people find it from my website or, hear about it because I do an interview or something, but we have a marketing strategy for the publishing company. We just do good work. Yeah. And, everyone deserves that, I think, because books are sacred, right?
I love it. I love it so much. Okay, well, let's flip this around and talk about some fun stuff. Tell me about the 250 most important words that an author will ever write.
Yes. And yes, I do. And let me first clarify, I am talking, as I said earlier, about nonfiction. This is different, like fiction authors, this doesn't really apply, but, as coaches and people who are building sort of a coaching consulting sort of based, business, chances are you're going to be writing a nonfiction book.
You can't help me write my book about goblins and wizards because I have some
ideas. Believe it or not, I have had clients who have come to me and I don't coach fiction, but they've used my Get Your Book Done program and showed up on coaching calls and even in my accelerator program, and they've written fiction. Like one of the ones that just came out up here in my pile, Rembrandt Rides a Bike, is a fiction story. We have someone else working on 100,000 word manuscript right now for fiction. So people do it, and I just kind of coach and guide and help them get through blocks. But I don't consider myself a fiction writing coach, although some of my clients have written fiction. So figure that out. Anyway, in the world of nonfiction, the whole, like we talked about this a little bit earlier, those banks of the river, you need to know where you're starting, where you're going, and what you're delivering. Mm-hmm. And the way that the author knows where your book is starting and where it's going and what they're going to get from this book is, let's see if you can guess it, back cover copy, which is also pretty much the same thing as your Amazon description. Okay. And people look at me cross-eyed when I tell them to write their back cover copy before they start writing their book. They're like, why would I do that? The book's not done yet. I'm like, because if you can't, in say 250 words, come up with a catchy headline, some great descriptive paragraphs, some strong, benefit-laden bullet points that are to the core essence of what your book is about, you don't know enough about what your book is about to be able to write it well. So the 250 most important words you're ever going to write are that back cover copy or the description, if you will. And just to reiterate, some of the components are like a little headline at the top, a couple of descriptive paragraphs, really engaging people in what's in it for them when they read this book, some bullet points that really communicate that if they're just a bullet point reader, oh, I'm going to learn that and discover that and explore this and uncover that and receive this. Okay, great. They know what the book is about. And so do you. When you write that first, it's like you're a North Star. You know, okay, anytime you get lost, you can go look at your back cover copy, which might not be the final perfect printed version, but it's good enough to help you see, am I writing, connecting with what I'm saying I'm delivering in this book by this back cover copy? So it acts as one of the banks of the river.
Nice. Okay, cool. That's great. I in 100 years, I wouldn't have come up with that. Write the back cover first. I love it. That's great.
Yeah, people kind of go, "Eh," and then they're like, "Oh, this is brilliant," because it's
tracks.
hard. Like I push them. I'm like, this, because they might write. I just had someone write like 1,200 words of back cover copy. She's in my accelerator program, and we're on the phone, we're talking. I'm like, listen, is it okay if I just take 15 minutes and take what you did and kind of distill it down?
Mhm.
And within 15 minutes, I had written her, 250 words, and she's like, oh, that's exactly what I wanted to say. Like now I have this clarity that I know what my book is about. Thank you. So it's critical. It's a really important piece to do first, but people don't usually think to do it first, but it is important.
So I suspect I'm like a lot of many other people who I feel like there's a book inside me. I know I'm a marketing expert. I know a lot about it. I don't necessarily know exactly what I want my book to be about. If I sat down to write those 250 words, I suspect it would feel disjointed. It would probably be more than 250 words. How would you coach me to narrow that down and to get that 250 words and to really nail it?
Well, the first thing I do before I had you write those 250 words is do some deeper introspective work first. Like I'd have you dig a little bit first. The first thing I'd have you do is complete a tool that I developed called the Transformation Quadrant, and we have a resource where everyone's gonna be able to get this and other foundational pieces free.
Mhm.
But the Transformation Quadrant, there's 4 questions that I tell everyone they need to answer first before they begin writing. Like the very first thing I have people do is this. And that is first and foremost asking yourself, no, granted, I am a transformational author coach. So for me, coaching people to write a book, it's about the transformation it's going to bring in these 4 levels. So that's why we're looking through this lens, because this is my, this is my stake in the ground, like what I do and what makes it different. Very first question, ask yourself is, what transformation do I want for myself
Mhm.
through the process of writing this book?
Mhm.
Like, what's in it for you? What do you want to, grow? What do you want to transform? What do you want to let go of? What do you want to claim? Also whatever that is, you got to look at that first. Then the second question to really answer is what is the transformation you want for your readers?
Right.
And I guide people sort of through a process to really connect them with that reader when they're sitting with, your book in their hands at the end of their book, and they're, in the deepest part of their heart, thanking you
Mhm.
for the transformation that you brought them. Like, what is that you want them thanking you for? And that will help sort of guide the message. The third transformation to take a look at is, what transformation do you want this book to have for your business? Right?
Mhm.
Because a book does have the power to be like a key
Yep.
that turns over the engine of your business in a way that you haven't been able to do yet.
Mhm.
So it's important to understand, what is the transformation that you want this book to bring the business. And then fourth question to ask yourself in this transformation quadrant is, what is the transformation that you ultimately would love to see in the world as a result of
Mhm.
this book being done? Like, what's the big change that is possible out there if enough people read your book, embody your book, implement what they learned, make those shifts, make some different choices, live their life differently? What then might be possible out there in this world that is, in need of a lot of positive messages for sure at the time that we're living in? So, like, when you answer these questions and then digging into who's your ideal reader,
Mhm.
what is the problem or challenge that they're facing? What solution do you have for that problem? What's your core philosophy? Like, what are you trying to communicate at the
Mhm.
core essence versus like what you stand for? And once you go through all these foundational pieces, it gives you sort of the pieces of the puzzle that can help you put together that 250 word back cover copy, which is, then like you go into, then the outline comes together relatively, easily, and then you can get into the writing. But it's like building you can't build a building without a foundation.
Yeah.
Can't write a book without a foundation.
This is fascinating for me because what you're talking about, what you're calling foundational pieces, when for Boxer, for our company, when we work with our clients, we do the exact same thing. We call it branding and messaging.
Mm-hmm.
That's totally what you're talking about. And
Yep.
branding, messaging, you're picking out your ideal customer avatar. Who are you writing to? And thinking about all that kind of stuff. It's an interesting correlation, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you don't get that stuff right at the get-go, you're either going to get stuck in what I call the author's merry-go-round, just going round and round and round, maybe starting and stopping, but never actually getting off to go forward.
Yeah,
You'll
unfocused.
unfocused. You'll end up there. You'll end up stuck. You'll end up like I did earlier when I got coaching, even when I said like it doesn't feel right. Like my coach didn't dig deep enough to me to like, okay, let's peel this back and look at what is going to feel right.
Yeah.
It's where every great project, book, business, course, speaking, like everything begins in those foundational pieces. So yeah, it is branding and messaging just in the context of the book.
I love it. That's great. Cool. So I'm writing a book and I've got this wicked thing that people call writer's block. I've got a block. What kind of things can I do to work through that?
Well, first of all, you need to understand that like there's really no such thing as writer's block. Because if I told you right now to think of someone that you loved and write them a letter, someone you love who's going through a tough time, like you could sit down and write them a letter easy. Like you're not blocked in the writing. Usually the block happens, or the thing that someone experiences a block happens, is because they don't have that clarity. There's some question, there's some place they haven't dug, deep enough. Or oftentimes, especially with the authors that I work with, because it's a very potent and powerful personal transformational journey. Sometimes that block is there because like they realize this is happening and all of the part of them is going to feel vulnerable or exposed, or what if such and so doesn't like it? What are people going to think? When those things start creeping up, it can show up and look like something called writer's block, but it's not really writer's block. It's like, okay, we just have to, help you navigate this growth edge to become the person who can put this book out there and move forward in delivering your message without this fear of what are others going to think, because you're so rock solid in it that you can just go.
Yeah.
So there, and it's interesting, when I interviewed Gay Hendricks several years ago for one of my programs, it was a summit I was running. He said this incredible thing that he suggests that people look at when they have this thing called writer's block, quotes, writer's block, is to ask themselves as an author, like, and at this question, I was like, really? Wow. He said, ask yourself what part of yourself needs to be loved right now.
Okay.
Like if you're writing and you're stuck, it's like, it's like this total U-turn from where you think you're going. But if you stop and like, okay, wait, what part of myself needs to be loved right now? You might end up discovering the part that, feels insecure because you actually don't have the clarity you really need to be where you are in the process of writing the book. Or it could be that it's like, oh my God, that part of me that had a fourth grade English teacher, put red marks all over my first, failed essay. And like, it's still in there somewhere that it's not going to be good enough. What are people going to think? Who's, all of these things. So when Gay said that, it kind of stuck in my mind, like, that's a good question to ask. So there's a couple, different approaches to take with the writer's block thing, but it really isn't writer's block. There's always just something else going on that's showing up as that.
So it sounds, Gay it sounds like he's perceiving it as an upper limit.
Yeah.
And that's something you got to work through.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's about digging in here.
Yeah.
Digging in here. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Digging wherever you got to dig. Right. Yeah. And the thing is though, like, here's like, I've got a client, she's just about to submit her manuscript for publishing. She was in my accelerator program. She's come over to the publishing company. And she's like, she held on to her manuscript for probably 6 weeks longer than she needed to because of the fear. And it just took she's like, some people in my family don't know that I had some of these experiences. Like, how do I grapple with that? And I just, had to lovingly and tenderly coach her to just send it, to trust that if she's gotten this far, she's meant to share these messages, and chances are people are just going to love her more, not less, because of how much more they know of who, their friend or family member actually is and what she's experienced. And the moment that she sent in that manuscript, it was like these chains, that had been attached to her, tethering her down, just broke free. And you can see this woman now like rising, really stepping forward into the light, into the messenger, into, the leader that she is here to be, because she's like, she did it. She's finally willing just be like, screw it. Like, this is my story that needs to be told. These are my messages. This is my wisdom, my knowledge, my expertise that needs to be told. And she's like a changed woman. And I see this happen over and over and over and over again.
I love that.
It's a game changer. When you really
Yeah.
do it, it frees you in ways that I don't think anything but a book can.
One way that I kind of like to look at that is the act itself. So her actually going through the publishing is like she's raising her ceiling at that point, and then as she's rising up, that's raising the floor. And
Yes.
so she eventually, you work your way up that way. First you raise the ceiling, then you raise the floor. Then you raise the ceiling, then you raise the floor. You got to do the action, and then everything will follow.
Yeah. I had another client. She was so scared. She's like, oh, she's like, I don't know if I can do this. I have to do this. I don't know if I can do this, but I have to do this. It was like this real battle. And again, it was like the battle of like, she's coming through the birth canal, about ready to pop this baby out in the world. She's got her publishing date set. She's got her launch set. She's, all this stuff is set. And she's just freaking out. Is it going to be good enough? All the things that people think when they, have a book coming out of them, or coming out of a publishing company that they have birthed. And like within 7 days of the book coming out, like she was being interviewed on some radio station, talking about her book because her media had hit at the same time. And she's like, I went from being like terrified to talking about my book on radio, like so comfortable, so confident. She's like, and people are just raving about it and they can't believe how amazing the cover looks. And when that kind of stuff happens, as a person, she is now ready to soar. She can pretty much do whatever she wants to do now because in her mind and in many people's minds, they did the hardest thing, which is put it out there. So now they're like, after that, I can do anything.
Nice. I've got a note here, Christine, that says trouble at the border.
Yeah.
Would you like to expand on that?
I would, but first I need to give credit to the first person that I heard teach this, which is the author of the book, The Energy of Money, Maria Nemeth. I was at a workshop of her and I had her talk, I heard about this the first time. And what she talks about is like, there's this line. And on one side of that line is the sort of the invisible, the intangible, the still idea concept, not yet physical reality. And there's a line. And the other side of that line is the world of like the physical, the manifest, the tangible, the dream realized, like the thing is real. Mm-hmm. And she said that as you get closer to the line where things flip from the intangible, invisible, and world into the tangible, visible world, she said the closer you get to that line, the more the pressure increases. And the more the pressure increases, she says, when that happens, you're at this place called trouble at the border. Because what some people do is mistake that pressure as they get up to that point of bam, everything's different on the other side when it's manifest reality. The closer you get to that line where everything changes, she said, the easier it is to think that because it's difficult, because there's this pressure, because it feels more challenging than it had been when you were further away from that line. She says too many people perceive that trouble at the border as a reason to retreat. Like, oh, this is hard. I'm not supposed to be doing this. And this is, I think, where my coach was thinking I was at. Oh, you're just a trouble at the border, Christine. Like, write this book that isn't the right book and build this business. Like, I knew better, like I said. But for a lot of people, they experience trouble at the border. And they're like, oh, this is too hard. And all the voices start kicking up about the million and one reasons why they, maybe shouldn't do this. And the thing is that trouble at the border instead, truly, like that is your indicator in 99.9 out of 100 cases. I was the exception back then, but most of the times it's like when you get to that point, like, and it feels like, oh my God, I can't do this. Like, you got to understand that when you feel that way, that is because you are so close to doing it. That you just had like, it's like the person who gave up digging for gold. Like a foot away from the gold mine. You know, like that's what trouble at the border is about. So you can't take it as a reason to beat yourself up, doubt yourself, retreat back in fear. You need to, as long as you're not feeling like deep down inside, like I was, you need to be like, okay, I'm getting closer. This is hard. I must be close, and keep going because it's going to tip. You'll be on the other side very shortly when you get to that point.
Time to cowboy up or cowgirl up.
Yes.
Get her done.
Get her done.
How do you distinguish between something that's not working genuinely and the trouble at the border?
Really good question. Let me just connect with that question for a moment. Like I don't talk about that a lot. So
it's a tough one, I think.
Yeah. Like I'm just going back to my experience back when I wrote my book and it didn't really feel right.
Yeah.
I wasn't really excited about what was on the other side of that line.
Mm-hmm.
Like I yeah, it was hard, but what was over here, I wasn't really excited about. Whereas other times when I've done hard things, like I've hit trouble at the border, but I've been so excited about like what's on the other side. It's like, I'm just going to, like a dog at a bone. I'm going to go out this thing. I'm going to like allow it to happen. I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep stepping forward because I want what's on the other side. I can feel, and I feel good about what's on the other side. And it's like, there's this excitement about, yeah, man, it's tough now. And oh, my stuff's coming up and, whatever, I'm going to calm my monkey mind down or whatever it is. But like, I so want, and I'm so excited about what the other side is for me that like, you're willing to do anything to get through that. Like, I did not feel that way back then. Like, I was like, yeah, I know it kind of looks good and it might be nice, but I wasn't like, yes, like that is what I want. I didn't have that feeling. So that might be a good, distinguishing point. Like, do I, how badly or how connected or how excited am I with what's on the other side? And if you're not excited about it, then it could be an indicator that something's a little bit off, go back, realign, readjust, and then come back to the border again for something that feels better on the other side.
Nice. I think that's helpful. I hope that's helpful to the listeners. I think that makes sense to me. It's just, you have to be a little bit self-aware and gauge your level of stoke. How stoked are you on what's next? I
love it. There's a book title, The Level of Stoke.
Right? Maybe that's the one that I'll end up writing.
How to evaluate what you should or shouldn't be doing.
Right? Christine, I want to thank you for being here with us. I want to be respectful and cognizant of your time. Real quick, I want to circle back. You mentioned the Transformational Quadrant. You had some resources for that. Can you tell us about where people can get those?
Yes, this is something that I've done fairly recently in my long line of like free resources that I offer people. But we have opened up the entire first module of my award-winning Get Your Book Done program, which has been generating and producing authors since 2007. The entire first module for you, which are the 4 critical first steps of building that foundation and getting the banks of the river in place. You can get access to it absolutely free. It's at freebookWritingHelp.com. I'm sure it'll probably post it in show notes, but it's easy to remember, freebookWritingHelp.com. And when you register there, you're literally going to get like a username and password into my membership site where I have all my courses. And you're going to be able to go in and experience the entire first module and get these first pieces of your foundation built absolutely free. I mean, there's videos, there's downloadable action guides. Like there's a lot that went into building this, helping you build this foundation. And it's all there free for you at freebookWritingHelp.com.
That's awesome. Is there anywhere else on social media or anything where people can connect with you?
Well, yeah. I mean, Facebook, I'm at Christine Kloser. Instagram, I'm Christine Kloser. LinkedIn, Twitter, Christine Kloser across the board. And Clubhouse, also Christine Kloser. So I try to run, a room a week around book writing stuff. If you have questions, you want to join me there too. But yeah, and just my main site is christinekloser.com. You can probably go there and learn more than you ever needed to know, but it's there. It's there for you, along with links to my social media as well.
And that's Kloser with a K for those listening. Christine
Kloser
with a K. Christine, I want to thank you again for joining us here. This has been a great conversation for me, selfishly. I love how romantic you are about books. I'm the same. So this has been really fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you. My pleasure. Happy writing, everyone.
Cheers.